Yesterday, the jury in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial began deliberations. That is to say, they went into private and began discussing whether or not Kyle Rittenhouse is guilty on one or more charges. We did not get a verdict. By the end of the day, it was announced the jury would retire for the evening and they would come back in the morning and continue. But my friends, I believe we are screwed no matter what happens at this point. You see, we all knew that the defense had made a motion for a mistrial with prejudice. What that means is the trial is over. You cannot retry Kyle Rittenhouse on any of these charges ever again because double jeopardy would apply. The reason for the mistrial with prejudice, as we knew it, was that the state violated the constitutional rights of Kyle Rittenhouse. The judge even said so, and that they had tried admitting evidence that had already been not allowed by the judge's ruling. Well, they violated the rulings, the rights, and that's what we knew, right? We're now learning. Kyle Rittenhouse prosecutors withheld evidence that could have potentially exonerated Kyle Rittenhouse as per the prosecution's argument. What I mean to say is, I think we all know what happened on that night. We've all heard the testimony from the state's own witnesses and the defenses that Kyle Rittenhouse was acting in self-defense. But the prosecutors were able to get a major victory. They said, we have drone footage showing Kyle Rittenhouse pointing a weapon at people, the Zeminskis in particular, and thus Rosenbaum was acting in defense of others. You cannot provoke someone and then claim self-defense unless you exhaust all effort, opportunity to retreat and get away. I believe that's the case. Now, there's no footage of Kyle Rittenhouse pointing a weapon at anybody, but they had this drone footage, which you're like, look, we enlarged it. You can see it. That was their argument. The judge said, okay, well, if that's an argument, show it to the jury. The defense argued you can't really see anything. The only thing the defense was able to muster up was this is CGI enhancement and you shouldn't be allowed to show it. And then the prosecution says, still, they were able to admit CGI evidence, which they shouldn't have been able to do. But they say, well, we still have the video itself anyway. You can watch it. Here's what we learned. The prosecution did not give that evidence to the defense, but it's worse than that. It's one thing if the state were to withhold evidence, meaning like they got a video of, let's say there was a crime of somebody got punched in the face. And the person who is accused says, I wasn't even there. I was playing skee ball. Oh, yeah? Do you have any proof you were playing skee ball? No. But what if the state had a photo of the person playing skee ball and they hid it on purpose? Okay, that's withholding evidence. And then later on, you can say the state knew that they had the evidence that I was not guilty and that's malicious prosecution. What the state did here is worse. The state did provide the video to the defense, but a low-resolution version. So you know what this would have been like? Imagine if the state had a photo that clear as day showed the man was playing skee ball the whole time and never got into a fight. And they said, we do have a photo, but then manipulated that photo so it was grainy and you couldn't really tell what it was. They give that grainy photo to the defense and say, look, it may be evidence, but that's for the jury to decide. And so the defense says, look, it's not a perfect alibi. We can't really see if that's you in the photo. Sorry. So they go to trial thinking they've been presented all the evidence. The state makes their case and says, here you go. And then sure enough, if the prosecution gets away with this, what will have happened is the defense, thinking this was the video, the low resolution version, didn't know how to craft an argument against the prosecution's fake provocation narrative. They looked at it and said, I can't see anything in this video. It's too blurry. That's why they argued against the enhancement. The state not only withheld evidence, but manipulated it, gave it to the defense so they would not know that they were being manipulated. They would think they were given the real evidence, but the state screwed up. The state, at the end of the trial in jury instructions, said, our version's much clearer. Whoa. Whoops. They almost got away with it. Now, I don't know what their intent was, but I'm telling you this, I don't think after grave constitutional violations, I don't think after trying to admit evidence into the trial the judge said no to, that this was an accident. There are two versions of the video. The high-def version the state had, where they could clearly see, or I should say they could see better what was going on. and the manipulated evidence they gave to the defense. The defense would then watch the video and say, it's too blurry to see anything. They would then think, when the evidence was presented to the jury would agree it's too blurry to see anything. Now, I want to read for you the filing because it's really, really important. But I will mention, when I first heard this, it was breaking news. It was yesterday. It was during the member segment on Timcast IRL. I thought, there's no way the defense didn't know they had a low-res version. I mean, they watched it, right? The defense had a 412 version. A 480, and the prosecution has a 1920. So that's standard def to high def. So I did a little experiment. I have this big TV to my left. It's how we show news clips to the guests on Timcast IRL. I'm really excited for this mobile studio we got, by the way. But like the TV pops up, and so I'm like, this is a high def TV. All right, I'm gonna play a video on it, standard def, and see what it looks like. And it was blurry. It was kind of hard to see things, but it was clear enough. Played some music videos, and then I played the higher resolution version, and it was definitely clearer. But you could still make out faces, eyes, hands, clothes, details, but you wouldn't be able to make out the finer details. The point is, I think to someone who doesn't realize it and isn't looking for it, they would not realize they were given a different version if it was watched on a TV. That is to say, when the state plays their video for the defense, for the jury, the defense probably didn't realize it was higher resolution. Only when they go back and play their video and they're looking at it, it's grainy, and they're watching it on these screens. Then they see it in court on this TV. It probably didn't occur to them. They only found out about this because the state said, our version is much clearer. You see, the defense had played their version of the video for the jury instructions, and I think here's what happened. I think the state manipulated evidence and tried to trick the defense so the defense could not muster up an argument. The defense would take the video back and say, here's the evidence against you, Kyle. And they'd look at it and say, I can't see a thing. Okay, we'll argue I can't see a thing. Then the state has a clear version they play, hoping the defense doesn't notice. But when the defense plays their low-resolution version, the state, the prosecutor, Binger and Krause realize, the jury is not going to be able to see anything in their garbage version. We need them to see our version before they deliberate. So they had no choice but to say our version is better, revealing the manipulation, revealing the cheating. So now we're looking at a mistrial with prejudice. We knew that the defense had filed that motion. But what we didn't know is that this evidence was withheld. And I'll tell you why. I have the story from Daily Mail. Kyle Rittenhouse prosecutors held back high-def drone footage from Kenosha shootings from defense and gave them low-quality video, sparking them to file mistrial motion that could see the teen walk free. Here was the story. This is a story from yesterday at 2:35 p.m. How did we miss this? If I had seen this, I would have been like, wow, this is my main. I gotta record on this. Is a big news breaking segment. Jack Posobiec posts at 10 p.m., 11 p.m. almost yesterday. Evidence was withheld, and everyone's like, whoa, this is crazy. Take a look at the headline from the Chicago Tribune. This is on Yahoo News posting it. Kyle Rittenhouse defense team seeks mistrial claiming prosecutorial misconduct. That's an old story. Last week, they asked the judge for a mistrial with prejudice. So when I saw this headline and I saw these stories, I ignored them. Because what am I supposed to do? If there are 10 stories that all say the same thing, I'm not going to read all 10 stories. And I do fact check, but I do like 2 or 3 sources. And that was last week. So when the story pops up again on Monday, I just felt like it was, it's like Minority Report, an echo. You ever see Minority Report, where the precogs can see the future and they have pre-crime and the police will arrest you before you even commit the crime? In that movie, there's a thing called an echo where the same report would come out a few moments later and they just ignore it. That's exactly what happened to me. In this story from the Chicago Tribune, they actually do bring up later on evidence was withheld. Now, why didn't the Tribune lead with that? No, they're bearing, this is a huge, huge story. It says the mistrial motion rehashes an issue that arose last week. Really? Then they say, Rittenhouse did X, Y, and Z. In its 7-page motion for mistrial, the defense accused the prosecution of providing a drone recording at a lower resolution. Whoa. In the middle of the story, after they already said it was rehashed, and then they rehashed the core of the story, the Rittenhouse case. That is intentionally burying the lead, in my opinion. Let me now show you what we've got going on here. Let me go down to the filing. First, here's the video that James Armstrong shows in court. When you look at this footage, you look at these photos, it's blurry, it's hard to tell, but it was a higher resolution, meaning if the defense had this, they could have actually seen something and presented an argument. Their case was weakened by prosecutorial misconduct. Malicious. It's worse than just not giving them the footage. They knew they'd never get away with that. If they wanted this in court, they had to do something, but they knew it didn't prove their case. So they gave a garbage version. Let me read you what they write in their motion for mistrial. Now, they also mention the grave constitutional violations and things like that, but check this out. On November 5th, 2021, the fifth day of the trial in this case, the prosecution turned over to the defense footage of a drone video which captured some of the incident from August 25th, 2020. The problem is the prosecution gave the defense a compressed version of the video. What that means is the video provided to the defense was not as clear as the video kept by the state. The file size of the defense video is 3.6 megabytes. The state's 11.2. Further, the dimensions on our video are 480 by 212 and the state's 1920 by 844. The video, which was in the state's possession, wasn't provided to the defense until after the trial concluded. During the jury instructions conference, the defense played their version of the video for the court to review. The state indicated their version was much clearer and had their tech person come into court to have the court review their clearer video. The video is the same. The resolution, however, was not. The state did not provide their quality video to the defense until Saturday, November 13th, and only did so upon specific request by Attorney Wisco, 2 days before closing arguments and after evidence had been closed. They're going to say, typically in a mistrial, that means that the defendant is foregoing their right to a single tribunal. It's a valuable right. In a mistrial with prejudice, they're saying you cannot cheat, and we demand these charges never be brought again because it wasn't the defense's fault this happened. The prosecutors in this case cheated, questioning the defendant's right to remain silent, and the judge snapped. But wait. There's more. Quite possibly the most important factor in this filing that needs to be brought up. Section 11. After lengthy comment, the prosecutor stated, "I thought my good faith belief, you had left the door open a little bit. Now we had something new and I was going to probe it." The court responded, "I don't believe you." The judge may be a good guy. I think he's making some errors and he's got some difficult choices. And I think we are all in serious trouble philosophically and our judicial system and our freedoms. And I'll explain that in a second, but I want to point this out. The judge said to the prosecutor, "I don't believe you." That is an acknowledgement to the defense that the prosecutor is not acting in good faith in this trial. But the judge took no action. The defense can now definitively state the court is prejudiced against them. The court itself stated, "I don't believe the prosecution." But we're not going to do anything about it. Carry on. That is to say, the court believes the prosecution is acting in bad faith and trying to cheat, but they will allow it. The defense now knows this. There is no way Kyle Rittenhouse can have a fair trial if the judge knows or believes the prosecution is being untruthful and allows him to continue. So we're in trouble. Because where might this go? Okay. There's a few scenarios. The jury comes back and says guilty on all counts. They'll hand the verdict to the judge. The judge will see it and say, fold it up, crumple it, and say, "At this moment, I am going to grant the motion for a mistrial with prejudice to the defense for the reasons stated," and then explain it to the jury. And the jury will be confused why we did all that deliberation and all that work for no reason. If he does, the left will say the judge is corrupt. The jury made their, announcement. They saw the evidence and the judge is just protecting Kyle Rittenhouse. When in reality, the prosecution sabotaged this case. Something else might happen. The jury could come out. The judge could read the verdict and it says not guilty on all counts. And the judge could be like, "Read your verdict." And they say on the count of 1, not guilty, 2, not guilty, 3, not guilty, 4, not guilty. And then what happens then? The prosecutor laughs and goes, "I may not have won this time, but I got away with it. The prosecutor will get away with it if the judge does not issue a mistrial with prejudice. But there's more. So not completely, but I'll put it this way. The judge cannot allow the prosecutor to get away with this. And some people have said the judge wants the jury to issue their ruling because he wants it to be clean. He wants people to say the state made their case and the jury said it. You can't complain. And I understand that point. It's not a bad point. But it would allow the prosecutor to get away with it. So there's something else that could happen. Maybe the jury comes back. The judge reads the verdict, not guilty on all counts. The jury then reads it. We find the defendant not guilty on all counts. And then the judge says, now hold it just a minute before everyone leaves. Binger, I am going to go after you for prosecutorial misconduct and overreach. And I want to make sure you are not allowed to do this again. I don't know exactly what the judge could do in that capacity, but it's possible there's major complaints filed after the fact. But it's a gamble, isn't it? If the prosecutor broke the rules, you need to come out immediately and say he broke the rules. If the judge says you've committed a grave constitutional violation, you've admitted evidence against my rulings, I don't believe you are acting in good faith, and now there's evidence they withheld evidence. Now there's new filing and evidence. They withheld evidence from the defense. The judge must say, in these United States, we do not allow prosecutors to get away with this. And to all of you who are expecting a conviction of Kyle Rittenhouse and want him convicted, I can only say, blame Binger. That's what the judge could say. Because when he withheld evidence from the defense, I have no choice but to issue a mistrial with prejudice. The state cannot just keep retrying Rittenhouse, and it's the prosecutor's fault this happened. A mistrial would be really, really good for the state. And the defense has argued, they're trying to get another kick at the cat, that's what they call it, that the state knew they were losing against Rittenhouse. So what could they do? Let's try again. Let's trigger a mistrial and force this trial to be, this trial to be a mistrial so that we can then recharge and bring back another trial. Not recharge, but like have a new trial with new jurors and a new attempt at proving his guilt. Because they screwed up. They called witnesses who testified that Rittenhouse was acting in self-defense. Their own witnesses did. Do you think those same witnesses will want to come back? They will be, I'm not going to keep doing this. And they maybe won't even call him. They cheated. And we have this tweet from Jack Posobiec I want to point out. Jack Posobiec tweeted, 2 jurors holding decision up, outright citing backlash per U.S. Marshal in Kenosha. He says they're worried about media leaking their names, what will happen to their families, jobs, etc., including doxing threats from anarchist groups. Maybe Jack's source is bad. Maybe Jack is wrong. Maybe Jack's lying. I don't think Jack's lying. I think Jack has sources. It doesn't mean his sources are right. Jack Posobiec has had some scoops that turned out to be accurate. And he's had some scoops that didn't pan out, but we don't know. Like there was talk about a major lockdown or something, and then it never happened. But that could just be because the scuttlebutt, the source, was relaying to Jack. It was just that, something they may or may not do. The left keeps saying, there are no U.S. Marshals in Kenosha right now. That's a federal thing. Kyle Rittenhouse was in Illinois when he was arrested. He was transferred to Kenosha. So, wouldn't there be marshals to transport across state lines? Illinois jurisdiction law enforcement wouldn't do it, would they? I could be wrong, but my understanding is that when it's dealing with transporting someone arrested in one state to another state, the U.S. Marshals would do it. So, pending the verdict, a U.S. Marshal would then be here, wouldn't they? Okay. Maybe the U.S. Marshal has nothing to do with this because marshals are federal and this is a state issue. Maybe there is a federal marshal in Wisconsin simply because a different individual needs to be transported to Tennessee. Maybe the marshal's there for that reason. The marshal knows Jack Posobiec and was having a discussion about safety issues at the courthouse. And they said, well, look, we got a couple jurors holding things up because they're worried about these protests. So consider that when you're transporting your guy out. I could speculate 1,000,001 reasons why there could be a U.S. Marshal saying this. If you want to debunk what Jack is saying, debunk what he is saying. If you want to say one source is not confirmation, I will agree with you. I will absolutely agree with you. And I'll say, okay, maybe I was a little hyperbolic. Maybe we should be skeptical on this a little bit. I don't know for sure. But I think it's fair to point out that the jurors are scared. Protesters and supporters were outside the courthouse. They were yelling, they were bullhorning, and there were some fights breaking out. You think the jury doesn't know that? How about for lunch? They want to break for lunch around 12:30 during deliberations. So they say to the bailiff or whatever, we could really go for some pizza, man. Do you think we can get a delivery? And the bailiff goes, look, there's a lot of people outside protesting. I don't know if a delivery is going to be able to come in. I can maybe pick something up. Well, there's protesters outside? Well, that has nothing to do with the trial. They didn't sequester the jury. The jury knows there's protesters out there screaming, demanding, quote unquote, justice. So I think they were probably worried. I think they were probably scared. And I think Jack's tweet makes sense. So we're screwed. Because no matter what happens now, they're going to riot. I think even if they get if they get a guilty verdict after the prosecutorial misconduct and the judge does nothing, we're screwed. Our fair trials are over. It's a cultural issue. It's not just a state issue. It's not just Wisconsin. If the judge, no matter what happens, it's just bad news across the board. But at the very least, if Kyle Rittenhouse is found to have acted in self-defense, which I believe should happen, that will still be a victory. The riots will be bad, but so what? We do not tolerate the threat of riots and violence to stop justice. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Stay tuned. We got more information coming on this, and I'll be tracking the verdict. And I'll see you all then.